There was a time when walking into a Canadian club on a Saturday night meant you were guaranteed to hear hip-hop, dancehall, or house music, but never Afrobeats. DJs would maybe slip in a Wizkid or Davido track as a vibe switch, but it wasn't the main course. Fast forward to today, and Afrobeats owns the room. It's the heartbeat of the night. The energy, the rhythm, the culture, it's everywhere. But how did that shift happen? What was the turning point that took Afrobeats from being a niche sound to the centerpiece of Canadian nightlife? Let's rewind to the mid-2010s. This was when Toronto, Ottawa, and Montreal started seeing a new kind of energy in their nightlife. The African diaspora was growing fast. More students were arriving from Nigeria, Ghana, and other parts of West Africa, bringing with them their sound, their slang, and their confidence. These weren't just immigrants adapting to Canadian life, they were culture carriers. They brought the vibe. At first, Afrobeats was something you mostly heard at house parties or university events. Someone would connect a Bluetooth speaker, and the playlist would go from Burna Boy's Like to Party to P-Square, Wizkid, and Wanda Cole. The beats were infectious. Even people who didn't know the language felt the rhythm. You could see it in the way Caribbean and Canadian students reacted. The music crossed boundaries, and soon, everyone was trying to catch that same groove. But the real turning point came when DJs and promoters started recognizing what was happening. People like DJ Magic Flows, DJ Havel, and DJ Damager saw that when they dropped an Afrobeats track in the middle of a regular club set, the energy in the room shifted instantly. You'd have a dance floor that was barely moving suddenly light up with excitement. It wasn't just Africans dancing anymore, it was everyone. That universal connection gave Afrobeats a permanent place in the rotation. Then came the rise of social media and streaming platforms. Suddenly, artists from Africa weren't just local heroes, they were global stars. Burna Boy, Davido, and Wizkid were topping charts on Apple Music and Spotify. Songs like Ojalegba, Fall, and On the Low were getting massive radio play. For Canadian DJs, it became impossible to ignore the demand. People were walking up to the booth requesting Afrobeats tracks. And once those songs hit, the crowd's energy was unmatched. Toronto was ground zero for this shift. With its massive African and Caribbean population, the city became the testing ground for Afrobeats nights. Promoters like AJ Styles, who were already hosting African-themed events, noticed that demand was exploding. What started as cultural nights turned into full-scale club takeovers, events dedicated entirely to Afrobeats. Venues that used to run hip-hop Fridays or dancehall Saturdays started flipping the script. The cultural crossover helped too. Afrobeats didn't just coexist with other genres, it blended seamlessly. DJs started mixing Burna Boy with Drake, Wizkid with Pop Kane, and Thames with Party Next Door. It was smooth, melodic, and addictive. The rhythm of Afrobeats felt familiar to Caribbean soca and dancehall lovers, while its clean production and catchy hooks appealed to mainstream clubgoers. That fusion made it unstoppable. And once Canadian artists began experimenting with Afrobeats influences, things went to another level. Artists in Toronto started adding Afrofusion elements into their sound, blending R&B, trap, and African percussion. Suddenly, it wasn't just imported culture, it was homegrown. Local DJs could play Canadian-made Afrobeats tracks alongside international hits, creating a uniquely Toronto experience. One major moment that changed everything was when big Afrobeats artists started performing live in Canada. When Burna Boy, Wizkid, and Davido began selling out venues in Toronto, it sent a signal this wasn't just a passing trend. These artists had massive fan bases in Canada. Promoters started investing more money, clubs started adjusting their sound systems to fit the Afrobeat percussion, and DJs realized this was more than just a sound. It was a movement. From there, everything accelerated. You had dedicated Afrobeats nights like Vibe Fridays, Afro Paradise, and Thriller by AJ Styles popping up across the GTA. Each one built a reputation for energy, culture, and authenticity. These weren't just parties, they were cultural experiences. The kind of nights where people wore Ankara prints, waved flags, and danced for hours without stopping. And as the scene grew, so did the competition. DJs started curating their sets like storytellers, building journeys through the evolution of Afrobeats. They'd start with old-school classics, move into mid-2010s hits, and close with new amapiano-infused bangers. Each set felt like a celebration of history and progress. You could literally feel how far the sound had come. Another big turning point came from visuals. When people started recording TikToks, Instagram Reels, and short clips of packed dance floors vibing to Afrobeats, the world took notice. Videos of Toronto Afrobeats nights went viral, showing people of every background losing themselves to the rhythm. That visibility fueled curiosity. More people wanted to attend, more venues wanted to host, and suddenly, Afrobeats wasn't just part of the nightlife, it was the nightlife. Of course, behind all of this were the pioneers, the DJs, hosts, and promoters who kept pushing even when venues were hesitant. There were times when Afrobeats events faced skepticism from club owners who didn't understand the culture. But consistency won. Once they saw packed venues, clean events, and happy crowds, they realized Afrobeats was not only cultural gold, it was good business. By 2019, Afrobeats had fully cemented itself in Canadian nightlife. Even before the pandemic, clubs across the GTA were adding dedicated Afrobeats segments. By 2022, those segments had become entire nights. And by 2025, there's not a single major club in Toronto that doesn't include Afrobeats in their rotation. Whether you're in downtown Toronto, Brampton, or Scarborough, you'll hear it, the drums, the rhythm, the life. The turning point wasn't just about the music, though. It was about identity. Afrobeats gave Africans in Canada a space to be proud of their roots. It reminded people that being African was something to celebrate, not hide. And for the Caribbean and Canadian communities, it created a bridge, a rhythm that everyone could move to together. Today, Afrobeats in Canadian clubs represents more than entertainment. It's culture, unity, and expression. It's what happens when diaspora pride meets creative innovation. The music has evolved, but the spirit remains the same: joy, connection, and pure energy. And as we look ahead, it's clear that Afrobeats isn't slowing down. More artists are touring, more events are popping up, and the sound continues to evolve. Whether it's Burna Boy dropping another anthem, Asaki blending amapiano with Fuji, or local DJs experimenting with new mixes, Afrobeats continues to shape the pulse of Canadian nightlife. So next time you're at a club and that rhythm hits, when the bass starts to bounce and the crowd goes wild, remember, you're witnessing history. The same sound that started in student house parties and small community halls has now become the lifeblood of the scene. And if you're loving this journey through the rise of Afrobeats in Canada, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because the story is far from over.